Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Siti Almasijida Fauzia, and today I will present my research entitled Directive Speech Act in Relationship Coaching Discourse, a pragmatic analysis of Matthew Hassi's utterance in the Mel Robbins podcast. I'll move to the introduction or background. So why this topic matters? In recent years, podcasts have grown significantly as a medium for education, self-development, and relationship coaching. What makes podcasting unique is the parasocial relationship that forms between the host and the listeners, a sense of closeness and trust even though they have never met in person. This dynamic makes the language used in coaching podcasts particularly powerful and worth examining. From a pragmatic standpoint, researchers especially interest in how directive speech acts such as language that guides, instructs, or advises function in this kind of discourse. Before diving into my study, here are the previous researches that I found. Studies by Slan et al. In 2022 and Widyastuti and Sartika in 2023 examined directive speech act in film and literary texts, both finding that asking was the most dominant type. More recently, researchers have shifted the intention to podcasts. Razik in 2025 look at political interview podcasts, Literasi in 2026 examine bullying theme podcasts, and Puspita and Aziza in 2025 focus on educational podcasts. While these studies have valuable contribution, they each investigate different contexts and purpose. So, uh, this brings to the gap in the existing literature. Despite the growing body of research on speech act in podcasts, there has been very limited attention given to relationship coaching discourse specifically. Furthermore, most prior studies focus on identifying and classifying types of speech acts without closely examining how those speech acts function as advice-giving strategies within a coaching framework. So this is the gap the research aimed to address. My studies introduce two key points of novelty. First, focus on a new context, which is relationship coaching in a public podcast setting, which has not been widely studied. And the second, a new analytical focus. Rather than simply classifying directive speech types, I examined how they function as advice-giving strategies. Guided by this focus, here are the research questions. First, what directive speech act does Matthew Hassi use in the Mel Robbins podcast? And the second, how do those directives function as relationship coaching strategies? And next, the theoretical framework. This study is grounded in speech act theory, originally proposed by Austin in 1962 and later developed by Shirley in 1979. This theory holds that utterances do not merely convey information, but they perform action. Shirley classified speech act into five types: assertive, directive, commissive, expressive, and declaration. And my main focus is on directive speech acts, which are intended to influence the hearer behavior or thinking. To further categorize the directives, researchers draw on Bach and Hannis 1979, a framework of advisory directive, which include advising, warning, counseling, suggesting, recommending, and encouraging. Move to the methodology. In terms of methodology, the study adopts a qualitative descriptive approach. The data was taken from Matthew Hass's utterance in the episode titled The Brutal Truth About Relationship You Need to Hear, available on the Mel Robbins podcast on YouTube. The data collection process involved repeatedly watching the episode, transcribing the speech, verifying the transcription for the accuracy, and then selecting utterance that qualify as directive speech act. Each selected utterance was then identified, categorized according to Pack and Harness framework, and interpreted in terms of its coaching function. Next finding. move to the finding. In total, the researchers identified 25 direction speech acts across the episode. These were distributed into 6 categories. Advising appeared the most with 11 instances, followed by warning with 6, counseling with 3, recommendation with 2, and both suggestion and encouraging each appeared once. The dominance of advising reflects a coaching style that prioritizes guidance over instruction or commands. The first, advising, is the most dominant category, which appeared 11 times. Advising in this context involved offering guidance without pressuring the listeners. Hasi consistently respects the listener's autonomy, presenting advice as option rather than commands. The topics covered through advising include self-reflection, personal values, and self-worth, and commitment in relationship. A clear example of this is when Hasi says, "You have the conversation you're too afraid to have right now." Next, warning. The most frequently with 6 instances. Unlike advising, warning draws the listener's attention to potential risk or negative consequences if they fail to act. Hasi used this strategy to help listeners recognize harmful relational patterns and understand the stakes of their choice. For instance, he states, "You will stay in the level 2 for the rest of your damn life if you're unwilling to have the conversation about level 3. This directness is a deliberate the coaching technique to motivate change through awareness of consequences. And the remaining 4 categories appear less frequently but serve distinct coaching function, which is counseling, recommendation, suggestion, and encouraging. Counseling, found 3 times, and help listener process emotional conflict before taking action. It addresses the inner psychological dimension of relationship challenge. Next, recommendation, found twice, goes a step further by providing concrete communication models that listeners can immediately apply. Next, suggestion, appearing once, offers an alternative perspective on difficult conversation, reframing them as opportunities rather than threats. And the last, encouraging, also found once, focuses on building the listener's confidence and emotional readiness to face challenging relational situations. So, to summarize, the study identified 24 directive speech acts used by Matthew Hussey, spanning 6 categories based on Bach and Hanni's advisory directives framework. The dominance of advising reflects a coaching style that is supportive and empowering. Collectively, this directive worked to promote self-reflection, emotional readiness, and behavioral change in the audience. House's strategies use of language allow him to influence a wide audience while still respecting each listener's autonomy and personal agency. In terms of contribution, the study enriched the field of pragmatics, particularly in the text of digital media or podcast discourse. It demonstrates that directive speech acts are not just grammatical tools, they are powerful communicative strategies in relational coaching. For future researchers, the researchers recommend extending this type of analysis to other relationship coaches or different podcast platforms, which would allow for a broader cross-style comparison and deeper understanding of how coaching language varies across contexts. And for the last, here are the references used in the study. Okay, so maybe that's all from me. Thank you so much for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.